Hello everyone. In this lesson we're going to take our Webpack automation to another level. Here's an overview of what we're going to set up. First, we will adjust things so that whenever we save a change to CSS or JavaScript files, that code is automatically updated or injected into the browser's memory without a full reload even being necessary. After that, we will set things up so Webpack reloads the browser for us automatically when we save a change to our HTML file. And finally, we will learn how to view our development site on any device connected to the same Wi-Fi or network as the computer we're working on. This is great for testing your website on a small screen like a phone or a tablet. Now there's one piece of technology that's going to make all three of these things possible. And that's a package named Webpack Dev Server. Just so you're aware, Webpack Dev Server is not an obscure package that I'm just a big fan of. Here on the NPM page for this package, we can see that just in the last week, it has 5.3 million downloads. So it's definitely an industry standard. So right now, let me show you how to begin using it. So first, we need to jump into our command line and run the following command with me. npm install, the name of the package is webpack-dev-server. After that, be sure to include --save-dev, and then press enter. Okay, now that we've installed the package, we need to leverage it. So to do that, we go into our webpack.config.js file. So down within this area where we have module.exports equals, and then we have different properties like entry, output, mode, watch, we want to add a new property. So maybe right after the comma for this output area, let's drop down and let's add a new property named dev and then uppercase server. So all one word, that's the property name, dev server, colon, and then it's going to be an object. So a pair of curly brackets, and then right after that, include a comma. Okay, within these curly brackets, let's drop down to stay organized. Let's give it a property named content uppercase base, so content base colon. And now this is where we point towards the folder or directory that we want Webpack to serve up. So in our case, that would be the app folder, right? Because the app folder is where our index.html file lives. Right? And that's what you would want to visit in the web browser. So we just want to point towards our app folder. So for content base after the colon, let's say path.join, parentheses, and then say __ dir name, comma, and then quotes, and then app. At the very end of this line, after the parentheses, let's include a comma, drop down. Let's add another property named hot, and set it to true. Let's add a comma. Let's add one more property named port and set it to 3000. So for a bit of an explanation for these two properties, hot is what's going to allow Webpack to inject our new CSS and JavaScript into the browser's memory on the fly without even needing a reload or refresh. Webpack calls that hot module replacement, or hot for short. And then port, this would have a value of 8080 by default, but we're setting it to 3000 just because I think it's a bit easier to remember. You'll see where this number comes into play in just a moment. Okay, for the time being, that takes care of the dev server object, but I do want you to look down just one or two lines and find our watch property. So right now it's set to watch true. Well, the dev server is going to be watching for changes, so we no longer need this watch property. So I would just delete this entire watch : true line, like this. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and save this file. And right now, I need you to jump into our package.json file with me. Within package.json, I want you to find the scripts area. Remember, we have this npm script named dev. Well, we just want to change what it actually runs. So instead of calling Webpack, we want it to call Webpack Dev Server now. So within these quotes, right after the K for Webpack, just say -dev-server. Okay, let's go ahead and save this file. And now we just need to make one more change before we can test things out. Right now we need to go into our main JavaScript file and tell it to accept hot module replacements, right? Or to accept updates on the fly. So let's dig into our app folder, and then assets, and then scripts, and then jump into the file named app.js. Down at the bottom, let's add a new line, and let's say if, parentheses, within the parentheses we'll say module.hot, after those parentheses, curly brackets, drop down in between, say module.hot.accept, in parentheses to call the accept method. So essentially we're just saying accept the hot updates if it makes sense to accept them. Let's go ahead and save this file, and now we can test everything out. So just like before, to tell Webpack to begin running or watching us, we just go to the command line and type in the following command, npm run dev. Go ahead and press enter. Okay, and now to check things out in the web browser, we do need to visit a different URL. So go up into your address bar and completely clear it out and type this in with me. Localhost : and then this is the port number. So after the colon, it's just 3000. Go ahead and press enter. Cool, so we see our website, but what's the big deal? What have we been working on for the last 5 or 6 minutes? Well, to refresh your memory, if we look at the overview for this lesson again, remember our first task was to set things up so that when you save changes to a CSS or JavaScript file, it updates in the browser without a full page reload. So right now let's ask ourselves, what is a full page reload? Well, in your browser, if you click this refresh icon here, or if you press Ctrl-R on a PC or Command-R on a Mac, it reloads the page. Now, a full page reload like that is very expensive in terms of performance or speed. It forces the web browser to completely reload and re-render and repaint the entire page. So anytime we can avoid a full reload, that's great. Now, just a quick tip so you can see if your browser's reloading or not. If you select a bit of text, right, if you click and drag on a headline, well, as soon as you reload the page, that text selection, that highlighted bit, is going to be lost, right? So if I press Command-R, it's gone. So now let's test things out to make sure Webpack can actually update our code without a full page reload. So go ahead and select a bit of text. Why don't you go ahead and click and drag and select this Your Clarity headline. Okay, and let's go into our CSS file and change the font size for this headline to something ridiculous. So within our styles folder, and then within our modules folder, let's jump into largehero.css. So here is that title selector. Right now, font size is set to 4.8 rem. Let's set it to something crazy like 9.8 rem. Now, as soon as we hit save, back in the browser, we don't need to refresh. And you can see the web browser itself didn't even refresh because our text selection is still in place. This proves to us that Webpack is doing its job and doing it very well. It's bundling up our code and then it's injecting that latest code into the browser's memory on the fly. Not only is this fast, but it's also convenient. When we begin working with JavaScript and, for example, maybe you click something and it opens a menu, well, it will be nice to be able to change the CSS for that menu without having to refresh and keep closing and reopening that menu each time. Right? If we can keep the browser's current state and just inject our new code into memory, that's going to save us a lot of trouble down the road. Cool, let's go ahead and put this font size back to normal. So instead of 9.8, just put it back to 4.8. Hit save. We don't even need to refresh. It's just updated on the fly. Perfect. At this point, let's change gears. So if we look at our lesson overview, item number 2 is to set things up so that whenever we save a change to our HTML file, the browser reloads on its own. To set that up, we just need to jump back into our webpack.config.js file. Go ahead and find your dev server object. Within it, we have properties like content base, hot, and port. So we just want to add one more property inside dev server named before. So before colon, and we're actually going to give it a function. So say function, parentheses, curly brackets. Now right after those curly brackets, be sure to add a comma. Okay, now within the parentheses for our function, let's give it two parameters, app, comma, server. And then within our curly brackets or the body of our function, we can drop down. And let's say server dot, and then there's a method named underscore watch. Within these parentheses, let's give it quotes, and let's tell it to watch for any file that ends with .html. So I would say dot slash, look in the app folder, slash, and then asterisk, asterisk will look for any subfolder if necessary, slash, and then asterisk, any file that ends with .html. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and save this file. If you need to pause the video while you type this out, that's okay, but let's test this out. So in our command line, let's press Control-C to stop the old instance of Webpack, Control-C, and then let's fire up a new instance of Webpack that will use our latest Webpack config code. So just npm run dev. Okay, back in the web browser, I will give it a refresh now that we're using a new configuration. And let's test something out. Let's do this. Let's go into our HTML file and edit this headline to end with an exclamation point instead of a period. So within our app folder, jump into index.html. For me, it's around line number 26. So if I change the period, add an exclamation point, and then save this file. Back in the browser. Cool, I did not have to refresh, it refreshed for me. Now just a quick note, when it comes to our HTML, it is performing a full page reload. So if I select this text just as an example, and if I put this back to a period and save, notice that back in the browser my text selection or highlight is gone. That's okay, it does need to load the new HTML page, so a full reload is to be expected. Let's make sure that our CSS is still working without a full reload though. So if we select this, go into our large hero, change the font size. Cool, so that is still working without a reload. Let me put that back to 4.8. Perfect. At this point, let's look at our overview again because we are ready to move on to our third and final task. We want to be able to view our website on any device connected to our Wi-Fi or our network. This way, it's really simple to test our website on a small screen like a smartphone or tablet. Let me show you how we can set this up. So back in our text editor, jump into our webpack config.js file. Within our dev server object, maybe right below the port line, let's add a comma at that line, add a new line, and we just need to give it a property of host, and let's give it a value of quotes, and then 0.0.0.0. So 4 zeros separated with periods in between. This will allow devices on the same network to be able to access the Webpack Dev Server from this computer. Let's go ahead and save this. And then since we have a new Webpack configuration, let's restart the Webpack task. So in the command line, press Control-C, and then fire it up again. So npm run dev. Okay, now from the current computer you're working on, you'll still be able to visit your website from localhost :3000. However, this address is not going to work on another device on your network. So for example, the question becomes, if you have a smartphone ready right now, what address would you type in the smartphone's web browser address bar to visit this site? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to find the local IP address of the computer you're working on. Now that's not the public IP address that a malicious user could take advantage of. We want the local IP address. So unfortunately, we can't just go to Google and type in what is my IP, because that would give you your public IP. To find your local IP address, it's a bit different depending on whether you're using Mac or Windows. Let's cover both. So if you're on Mac, just go into your system preferences and then click on the network icon. And then towards the top of the right-hand column, you should see a bit of text, and it will say which network you're on, and it will also include an IP address. That's your local IP. It should begin with 192.168 and then two other sets of numbers, and they're all separated by periods. So remember that number, take note of that number. Okay, if you're on Windows, to find your local IP address, go to the command line and run the following command, ipconfig. Press enter. The command line will output a bunch of text. You're looking for the one that's called IPv4 address. To the right of that, you'll see an IP, and again, it should begin with 192.168, and then a number separated by a period and another number. Okay, at this point, whether you're using Windows or Mac, you should have your computer's local IP address. So on your smartphone, type that IP address number that we just found into the address bar, and at the end of it, add in :3000, right? Because that's the port number that our dev server is running on. Cool, once you type in that address and push enter, you can now view your website on your smartphone, on your tablet, on another computer, whatever you wish. Not only is this great for seeing what things will look like on a small screen, but it can also boost your productivity. For example, if you have a tablet, you can now basically use it as a second screen, right? Like a second monitor during your development workflow. So you could set your text editor to take up the full screen on your main computer, and then you could position your tablet to the side of your screen and have the tablet with your website pulled up. And it will show you the changes in real time, right? So as soon as you save a CSS change, just a few milliseconds later, you will see the website update without a reload on the tablet or smartphone. Okay, so we've completed the third and final task for this lesson. But before we bring things to an end, there is one thing I want to point out. So do this with me. Within your text editor, or I should say within our project folder, remember that Webpack is creating this bundled.js file that lives within our app folder. Well, check this out. Do this with me right now. I want you to delete this file. So right-click on bundled.js and choose delete. Now, you might think that if we go to the web browser and refresh, it wouldn't be able to load that code, but you'll see that everything is still okay. And even if we make a change to one of our CSS files, right? So even if I go in and change the font size to something crazy and save, it successfully bundles and injects into the browser. And you'll notice in our folder structure that it did not regenerate a new file named bundled.js. This is because Webpack Dev Server does not actually output the bundled file to our file disk. The dev server actually just keeps the bundled file in RAM or in memory, so it's super fast. In other words, the dev server makes the file available from our address, so localhost :3000 and then /bundled.js. So the file can be accessed from this URL, but it doesn't actually exist on our hard drive. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out to save you a bit of frustration if you're wondering what's going on. Now don't worry, in the future when we're ready to actually push our files up onto the web so that other people from the public can view our website, we will set things up in a way where the bundled file actually is output to file disk. But for now, let's not worry about it, because this is the optimal workflow while we're building and creating a website. Really quick, let's just set our font size back down from 9.8 to 4.8 and go ahead and save. And that's going to bring this lesson to a close. In our next lesson, we're going to start a new chapter on responsive web design. Should be a lot of fun. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you then.